They say there's nothing lonelier than the open desert at night. For me, that emptiness was supposed to be a refuge. I had taken a temporary job as a weather observer at an isolated outpost in Utah, near the edge of the Navajo Nation. The outpost, a rusting metal structure held together by duct tape and wishful thinking, was perched on a high plateau. It overlooked miles of just nothing. I wanted solitude, but what I got was a waking nightmare. It started with the coyotes. I heard them yipping and howling in the dead of the night, their voices carried on the winds. That first week, I loved it, the raw wilderness of it all. I'd sit on the observation deck with my coffee, staring out at the dark expanse, imagining myself as some rugged frontiersman from another century. By the second week, the howls began to feel wrong. There was something off about the way the sounds carried, too high-pitched, too broken. Sometimes it didn't even sound like coyotes, more like something imitating them. That, or a person screaming. I kept brushing it off. My brain's good at rationalizing things that it doesn't want to deal with. Coyotes are weird animals. Their cries sound like children sometimes, even like people. Well, that's what I told myself at least. I tried not to think too hard about it, until the night that I saw one. It was 3 a.m, the wind rattling the loose bolts of the outpost like angry fingers. I'd stepped outside for a smoke. The stars were sharp, the air biting me. My flashlight swept over the scrubby desert below the cliff, catching movement. At first, I thought it was a lone coyote, skulking low to the ground. But as the beam settled on it, my skin turned cold. Its movements were stilted, jerky, like its legs didn't bend the right way. Its head swiveled too far to look at me, the eyes catching the light with an unnatural greenish glare. It froze as my flashlight pinned it, staring at me with something too focused, too human in its gaze. Then it turned and ran, not on 4 legs, but 2. I didn't sleep that night. The next morning, I radioed headquarters to report the sighting. I wasn't sure what they'd say. I think I saw a sick coyote is what I settled on. They told me someone would be out in a couple of days to check on it, but the static in their tone felt like they didn't care. My unease festered. That day, while making my routine weather observations, I found something odd at the edge of the outpost. A cluster of tracks in the red dirt. They weren't paw prints. They were something between paw and hand, as though some huge animal was trying and failing to mimic the walk of a person. There were too many tracks, a swarm of them circling the base of the outpost like something had been pacing or stalking. My stomach churned, and I couldn't bring myself to follow the trail. Instead, I shut myself inside, triple-checking the locks. That night, the howls came again. But this time, they were much closer. I woke up at 2:47 a.m. to scratching at the door. My bed was a thin cot on the back of the outpost, barely softer than the floor. I lay there frozen, the thin blanket pulled to my chin, straining to hear over the blood pounding in my ears. The sound came again, slow, deliberate, long dragging scrapes across the metal. At first, I thought it must be the wind blowing debris, but the cadence was too regular. It was like something out there wanted me to know it was there. I didn't move. I didn't even breathe for what felt like hours. Then came the voice. Help me. It was soft, muffled by the thick steel door, but unmistakable. A woman's voice. My breath caught in my throat. No one was supposed to be out there. The closest human was probably 50 miles away. Please, it said again, a whimper now. It hurt me. Every instinct screamed at me to ignore it, but another part of me, the stupid part, couldn't. I grabbed the rifle from the corner of the room, checked the chamber, and edged toward the door. Who's out there? My voice trembled with adrenaline. The voice didn't answer. Instead, there was silence, heavier than anything I'd ever felt. Then, a low chuckle, a rasping, guttural sound that made my skin crawl. Something slammed against the door, the force of it rattling the whole outpost. I staggered back, my rifle shaking in my grip. Whatever it was hit again, even harder this time. My heart felt like it was trying to beat out of my chest. And then, just as suddenly as it started, it stopped. By morning, the scratches on the door were deep and deliberate, gouged into the steel like claw marks. I wanted to leave, to drive back to civilization, but I was stuck. Headquarters hadn't sent a vehicle yet, and then I'd have to hike 20 miles to get to the nearest dirt road. Instead, I spent the day pretending nothing was wrong, trying to drown out the memory of the voice with meaningless busywork. I fixed the instruments on the weather station, inventoried supplies, and read a trashy novel I'd packed as a joke. But no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I caught glimpses of movement on the edges of the plateau, too quick and too far to be sure of what I had seen. Shadows that didn't match the shapes of the rocks, vanishing the moment I turned my head, and always that eerie, unnatural silence when the wind died down. As night fell, I barricaded the doors and windows, stacking everything I could find against the entrances. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the corner of the room with my rifle, waiting. The second night was worse. It started with howling, closer this time. It was almost on top of me. The sound reverberated through the thin metal walls, a cacophony of inhuman wails and shrieks. It wasn't just one voice. It was many, overlapping and discordant. At some point, I must have blacked out from exhaustion because I woke to complete silence. No wind, no creaking metal, nothing. And then came the knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks on the door. My stomach dropped. No one could be out there. No one human, at least. I stayed silent, clutching the rifle, hoping it would just go away. The knocking came again, and the voice returned. "It's me," it said, the tone eerily familiar. "Let me in. It's safe now." It took me a moment to realize why it sounded familiar. It was my voice. I don't remember how long I sat there, shaking and listening to that thing imitate me, pleading to be let in. At some point, it stopped, but I didn't feel any relief. The silence that followed was heavier, more oppressive, like the outpost itself was holding its breath. That was when I heard it. Soft, almost imperceptible, scraping inside the walls. It moved slowly, deliberately, traveling from one end of the outpost to the other. I realized with a sickening jolt that whatever was out there was now in here. My breath hitched as the sound grew louder, closer. It was above me now, in the crawl space. I pointed the rifle at the ceiling, trying not to hyperventilate. Then, it stopped. I didn't move, didn't dare to make a sound. My finger hovered over the trigger, shaking. The quiet stretched on for what felt like hours. And then, with an ear-splitting crash, the ceiling buckled, and something fell through. It landed in a heap, limbs twisted at impossible angles. My flashlight caught it as it began to move, and I wish I'd never seen it. It looked like a man. No, it looked like several men, as if someone had stitched parts together in a grotesque patchwork. Its skin was stretched too tight in places, sagging in others. And its face wasn't right. The features shifted, sliding over the skull as though it couldn't decide which face it wanted to wear. The thing let out a low, guttural growl that didn't sound human. I didn't even think. I just pulled the trigger. The rifle kicked against my shoulder as the shot rang out. The sound was deafening in the small room. The thing jerked back, a spray of dark liquid hitting the wall. But it didn't even fall. It stood there standing. It let out a sound, a laugh, wet and gurgling. It came at me faster than anything that size should have been able to move. I fired again and again, backing into the corner as it lunged. One of my shots caught it in the leg, and it stumbled, giving me just enough time to scramble through the door into the next room. I slammed the door shut behind me, locking it and shoving a desk against it for good measure. The thing hit the door once, twice, before going still, and then I heard it speak again. "You can't hide," it said, its voice shifting, blending my own with the chorus of others. "We're already inside you." The rest of that night is a blur. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I must have, because I awoke to sunlight streaming through the cracks in the boarded-up windows. The door to the other room was wide open, the desk shoved aside. That thing was gone, but I wasn't alone. There was more tracks in the dirt outside, leading away from the outpost. Dozens of them, all different sizes and shapes. They led to the edge of the plateau, then vanished. I radioed headquarters again, desperate, pleading for them to send someone. They said a vehicle was already en route and should have been there by now, but it never arrived. That was 3 days ago. I haven't heard from headquarters since. The radio's dead. Just static now. I've sealed myself inside the outpost, but I know it's only a matter of time. The howls are back, closer than ever. The voices come too, mimicking the people I've known, even people I haven't. Sometimes, when it's quiet, I hear myself begging for help, whispering from corners of the room. I tell myself I won't fall for it. Not again. I won't. But then, I hear footsteps in the next room. At first, I freeze, clutching the rifle, my heart pounding. It's here. Somehow, it's in here again. But when I swing the door open, rifle ready, I find myself staring down at myself. It's me. Same face, same filthy clothes, same terror etched into my features. My double's eyes widen, and it scrambles backward, hands raised defensively. "Wait! Don't shoot!" It screams. My voice, my exact voice. "It's me! The real me! You have to listen!" I hesitate. My mind reels, twisting into knots. Is this another trick? But its fear is so convincing, so human. Then it lunges for the rifle. We hit the floor in a triangle of limbs, and the weapon skids across the room. It's stronger than me, unnaturally strong. Its hands claw at my face, its nails too long, its movements jerking and wrong. I grab a metal pipe from the floor and swing wildly, smashing it across the head. Its face splits open like wet paper. But what's beneath isn't a skull. It's something darker, pulsating, writhing. It screams a high, chittering wail that rattles my bones, and the entire room shakes with it. I scramble back as its body twists and contorts, limbs splitting into new limbs, flesh bubbling like boiling tar. It grows taller, broader, filling the room, its shape devolving into pure chaos. Arms erupt from its torso, twitching and grasping, mouths forming and screaming along its grotesque surface. And then, I hear them, the voices. Not from outside, but inside me. "We're already inside you." I can feel it now, crawling under my skin, wriggling in my veins. My reflection in the shattered glass of the console flickers, the face shifting, breaking apart. My fingers curl involuntarily, not my own anymore. I stagger to the door, clutching my head as the whispers grow louder. My legs are weak, my vision blurring, but I manage to stumble out into the cold desert air. The wind howls, carrying the sound of laughter, my laughter, echoing from every direction. I look down at my hands. They're no longer mine. The skin stretches, tears, revealing something dark and alien underneath. My breath comes in short, ragged gasps as I drop to my knees. I don't know how much longer I have. I don't know what's left of me. The stars above are sharp and cold, uncaring. The desert stretches out in every direction, endless and empty. I open my mouth to scream, but the sound that comes out isn't human. It isn't even mine. The last thought that runs through my splintering mind as I dissolve into something other is this. How many others have heard the howls? How many others will it take?